All right, we'll call the July 17th meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Let the record show we are missing one commissioner, Mr. Troy Bush. First order on the order of business is the order of business. Is there, Mr. Hadley, do you have any changes to what's presented?
No, Mr. Chairman, I surely don't. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I'd look for a motion to approve the order of business.
So moved.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the order of business as presented. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the order of business say aye.
Aye.
Same sign. Again, same sign. Item 2 on the order of business is the minutes from the previous session. Is there any changes or corrections that need to be made to the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to approve.
We have a motion and a second to approve the order of business. Any further discussion? Or, excuse me, the minutes. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The minutes are approved. Okay, we'll move into our action items. Our first action item is a Renaissance Zone request. It's to consider for a project at 220 First Avenue West for the American Bank Center building. Mr. Josephson.
Good morning, Commissioners. Commissioner Friedrich, as you stated, this is an application for Renaissance Zone project from American Bank Center, and I believe they have their representatives are here today to give a presentation as to what their project is. Staff does recommend approval, and I'll get into that after they make their comments. Thank you.
If the representatives would come up and state your name.
Jared Bollinger.
Hi, Mr. Bollinger, and give us a little background on what you guys are doing
Yeah, I
for your
think
project.
Mr. Josephson oversold it when he said a presentation, but just we're looking at putting up a 14,000 square foot facility, replacing the existing facility. I think there's been some discussion, there's some awareness of it, but a good portion, the southern or the north 2/3 of our block, we're going to eventually demolish upon construction or completion of a new building. It's 14,000 square feet, 3 levels. It's going to be located on the southwest corner of that lot. I guess I would open it up for any questions.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for Mr. Bollinger regarding the project?
Just a comment, it's a beautiful design you have.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Bollinger. Mr. Josephson, do you want to kind of give us the details of the project?
No, certainly. So this is a case of a new construction on 2 lots that were previously developed, which are within the city's Renaissance Zone. We did confirm with the state Renaissance Zone coordinator that this is considered an eligible project under the state Renaissance Zone, the Century Code, and state Renaissance Zone requirements. Also, this meets a policy, a goal in the city's Renaissance Zone plan, which is to gain at least 3 improved structures or new businesses in the Renaissance Zone in a year. Also meets another objective in the plan, which is to foster a culture of progressiveness and change while recognizing the traditions and history of the area. And it also meets a criteria in terms of this is at least 50% of the full and true value of the property. This is a $13.7 million project, and the property is currently valued, the assessor has it valued at $169,500, so they easily exceed that 50%. Upon reviewing this, seeing that it meets both the state requirements and the goals and objectives in our Renaissance Zone plan, as well as in the comprehensive plan for the city, the staff recommends approval. They have asked for the full 5 years. Staff does recommend approval. This meets the criteria, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have. And this is a public hearing also.
Thank you, Mr. Josephson. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Josephson regarding the project? Or any details you have? Questions on? All right, hearing none. This will be a public hearing. So at this time, we will open the public hearing regarding this application. If anybody in the public has any questions or concerns regarding this project, please come forward and state your name. Anyone in the public has any comments, please come forward. Please step up to the microphone. Can you
My
state,
name is True White.
Yeah.
What else do you want to know?
do you have any comments regarding the project?
Well, we haven't been given the details of the project yet, so we don't know how to formulate our questions. I mean, I could ask a couple of questions, but they're probably included in what you're going to tell us about it. Doesn't that make a lot of sense? I mean, how come everybody looks funny?
What questions would you have regarding the project?
For example, will the alley be, how will the alley be used? Will the drive-through part of the bank be on the alley? Will the alley be being used as part of the getting to the drive-through part of the bank? And to what extent will would the alley be changed to a one-way deal like this one was behind your building, for example? Lots of questions, lots and lots and lots of questions that we haven't been given. We don't have any idea about the amount of this this Renaissance money. There's so many questions, I don't even, how about giving us some
Mr.
real
Chairman,
details?
Mr. Hadley?
Ms. White, the application has been advertised legally the last couple times, last couple weeks in the paper. We do have a pretty comprehensive set of plans and information in our office, and you're welcome to look through that.
I thought that's what
The site
meeting
plan and the meeting is not for distributing the information. The meeting is to have a public hearing on the information and then move forward on it with a recommendation to the city commission.
So we should have come to get the information from your office before and be well informed
When,
before coming here.
Yeah, the idea of their legal publication is that you get notice of it, which you obviously did, I'm assuming, because you're here. Then you would actually come in and get that information, sit down with either Stephen or myself, visit on what the request is, and then we could actually show you what that project is, and then you could formulate your own opinion and come here. And this meeting is for the public's opinions, the applicant to present, the commission to ask questions, and then the commission to make a recommendation to the city
We
commission.
don't have opinions until we have information. We're just here to ask questions. And
I'll provide Ms. White the staff report. It has a summary of what they're proposing, but this is a brand-new building that American Bank Center is going to be building on that, on that location. And it's what I believe it's 48,000 square feet. And, perhaps the applicants want to elaborate a little bit more on and maybe answer some of those, some of those questions. But this is a brand-new construction, and from what I understand, American Bank Center is going to consolidate, a number of their offices and other services at that location.
Correct. The facility itself is 42,000 square feet, 14,000 square feet per floor on 3 floors. It will consolidate our existing American Insurance Center, American Bank Center, and American Trust Center under one roof. It is self-contained within the lot. It does not spill into the alley. The drive-through lanes are all located west of the alley. They exit the bank lot on the west side of the lot. They do not exit through the alley. So I guess I'd take any further questions, but that, I think, summarizes some of what Mrs. White asked.
Thank you. Mr. Josephson, maybe you can touch on, I think she had questions on the amount of money that would be abated through this project. I mean, it's a 5-year tax exemption on what portion of this?
did ask the assessor for some information on that and didn't. As of right now, we don't have it, but I believe the applicant may have. Oh, okay.
It shows annual on, I'm seeing page 2 of a multi-page packet here, but annual tax levy savings of $153,000.
Essentially, what'll happen is they're going to continue to pay property tax. The assessed value doesn't change, so they will continue to pay property tax for 5 years, but it will be on the assessed value
Of just the current assessed
of the
value.
current, yes, of the current lots.
Correct.
On page, yeah,
17,000 in savings.
right. On page 2 of the packet, the annual property tax levy is $153,000. Potential annual income tax savings is $16,985,
$85,000 over 5 years.
approximately.
Thanks, okay.
Mr. Decker, it does say net property tax benefit of $769,000 over the 5 years.
Okay. And that's all in the packet for the commissioners.
Yep.
So that's income tax savings.
Yep, income tax and property tax
Yeah.
are both included in there.
Yep.
As far as the alley, my understanding is it's not going to be affected in any way. In fact, we're even talking about doing some improvements to the alley.
I don't believe there's any improvements to the alley plan, but this applicant is not planning on utilizing the alley at all. They're
Yeah.
basically separating themselves completely off of it. So I don't see us changing it to a one-way. That really isn't my call, but it would go through city engineering. But if there was a problem or an issue, but I don't foresee one because they're basically separating their use completely from the alley itself.
Yeah, the site plan I've seen, they don't utilize the alley at all, so.
Right, and they have, the American Bank Centers has been meeting with the city. They've been meeting with the building department, and I believe they've gone through site plan review. So, the city is aware of the details, for construction. So, and they have submitted for permits. They have made their submittals for building permits.
We're kind of ahead of schedule on the site plan review and the overall site, just because this information was available, so we've actually shared it with the site planning committee, and so a lot of the details like height of canopy and dumpster locations and all of that stuff's kind of already been worked out, so when they come through with the actual application to move forward, it should be pretty quick. So, I mean, a lot of those issues would have probably come up already.
Mr. Bullion, do you want to just touch on your timeline, start to finish? Just give a little background here so we have it on record.
Yes, sir, Mr. Friedrich. We do plan probably to construct a fence in the next 3 weeks or so. We would like to break ground in September of this year. It's looking to be a 14 to 15 month project. It would probably be December or so of 2020 that we'd be able to occupy the building.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bullion. Ms. White, you're up. Do you have any more questions?
I think it's just kind of hard for the average person to be able to comprehend why we need to give tax breaks of such consequence to a very well-established, functioning, profitable, growing bank, for example. There are lots of small people, small business people. We've been encouraging entrepreneurship to be broadened in our community. That kind of money could get spread out over a lot of small people, small businesses. It doesn't seem to me that the bank, I love the bank. I use the bank. It is my bank. I went there on purpose because it's a local bank. It's nothing against the bank. It just doesn't seem like that's where our tax dollars ought to go or be given. I mean, that's the one basic. I know you don't want to hear that. Sorry.
No, it's all right.
Can I, one
Sure.
other comment, Ms. White, just to address that. It isn't existing tax dollars that are going into this at all. It's actually foregoed tax dollars on their investment. So they're investing in an improvement on their property that's worth this much, And we're keeping the taxes at the rate that they are right now on the vacant land for 5 years. So we're foregoing some additional tax revenue, but we're not paying, your tax money and my tax money are not going into this project.
Foregoing those dollars is the same thing,
It's part of this program. So that's
this program.
the Renaissance.
That's
program.
why it doesn't seem, it may qualify. I understand that it qualifies by certain set criteria that Renaissance has. But that doesn't mean that it makes good common sense for us to use our money that way.
Well,
It's going to be done. I know I could be Abe Lincoln and give you the best oratorical.
Ms. White, you make a good point, but should we discriminate on the size of the business then and only give?
Yeah,
I
Yeah.
disagree. I mean, this program is in place, and it's 5 years. In 5 years, they're going to be paying the full tax value on it. So it gives incentive for growth in the downtown, and whoever's willing to do that. And our downtown for many years was deteriorating, and Americans done a great job.
we end up, it seems like we end up over and over and over giving the funds that are available from different kinds of sources to the biggest, most solid, already rich, and I could name them, of the businesses in Dickinson. This is the way it's been way back, and some of us are aware of it. Most people don't pay any attention to it, where it goes and how it goes and who grows and who benefits. This is just one. And this has been going on forever and ever under different labels, not necessarily the Renaissance, but others. But they get in the $160,000s of dollars for growth. Some other businesses, we're talking about helping the big boys get bigger is exactly what it's about.
Ms. White, if you looked at the agenda, there's a small business right behind this on the agenda applying for the exact same thing.
Well, good. I hope you give it to them.
But we're equal across the board. Everybody that applies and qualifies, we allow for this project. If we did not allow this, you would have an empty lot sitting there again
No.
for another 10 years. And what does that do to the downtown's value? Any of your property in the downtown, what does that do over the
Well, you
long?
give that kind of tax breaks to other smaller businesses, and I'll bet you they'll
Ma'am, if they apply, we will give it to them, and if they qualify.
encourage them.
We do. Trust me, we do.
Okay, so that's the point. That's why nobody comes here and even tries to tell you their opinion, because it's a done deal, and that's the way it's going to be. And we don't really have any say so after all. But, just some little old ladies don't have much to lose, so I come and say what I want to say, because you can't hurt me much more. Anyway.
Ms. White, we'll make that up over the years. I mean, this is a $13.7 million project. So even if we give them 5 years of reduction, they're going to be paying this over the lifetime of the bank. So, and that Renaissance is a project that we recommend people to use. We've had people haven't used it in the past for quite a while. And that's why we expanded it west, because we want the people on Villard and within wherever the Renaissance Zone is, like even your home, if you want to. You're entitled to it too.
Yeah, your properties downtown are entitled to
Absolutely.
you can apply for Renaissance if you're.
I know all about it. It was a Renaissance project.
Yeah.
Which is over now, and the paint's already falling off, but that's another thing. I suppose you don't want to hear about anything else, so.
It's a public hearing, you can.
I've got
Whatever.
parks, and I've got the Dickinson House that I can't seem to get any kind of an answer whatsoever. It's the same neighborhood, it's the same downtown, it's the same, not Renaissance project, but it has to do with Renaissance of the city of Dickinson. And I've been ignored for, 20 years? on why they, ever since Johnson was, maybe even before, you know, I can't get anything done to help to give an answer, even why the city isn't interested in the gifts that I've offered them in the past. And they're still sitting there, and I'm just getting older and older. And I need to have some kind of an answer. And no matter how many meetings I have with the mayor or not the mayor, but the administrator and past mayors, I don't get this kind of attention and answers of what to do. Okay, sorry.
Oh, you're good.
Anything else you want to ask
Have you had
me?
a chance, have you met with Mr. Goff, the new administrator?
Yes, I did.
What lot
Yep.
are you,
No answer, nothing.
is it your
No.
lot down by City Hall here?
Yes.
I will comment, first, we're getting off track, and this is a public hearing for the Renaissance Zone, but I have met with Ms. White, and I am working on some things, so we'll get back with you. It involves lots of moving parts, but she did bring some things to us that were of interest, and we're taking a look at it.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. White. Anybody else in the public that would have any comments regarding this Renaissance project? Seeing no other people coming forward, we'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, any more questions or concerns regarding the application?
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the American Bank Center petition for a Renaissance Zone tax exemption as being compliant with the City of Dickinson's Renaissance Zone plan, as amended effective July 1st, 2019, and with the City of Dickinson Comprehensive Plan, as well as being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
We have a motion to approve the application. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Mr. Dean.
Mr. Chairman, I will abstain from the vote.
Mr. Bollinger will abstain. Any further discussion regarding this application? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the Renaissance project at 220 First Avenue West, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, we'll move on to the item 2 on our agenda this morning, Renaissance Zone. This is to consider a request for a Renaissance Zone project at 1269 West Villard Street. I see the applicants are in the audience. If they'd like to come forward and give us a little background on what they're asking for. Susie?
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for having us.
State your names, please, for me.
I'm Tim Seiler. This is Susie Lepore. We're Infinity Real Estate Group in 327 properties. The property in question, or the property that we're proposing to improve, is the Superior Laundry Building. The building's been vacant for about 8 years. It's on the west end on the corridor coming into Dickinson, so it's kind of the gateway. I think our project meets the criteria totally of the idea of the Renaissance Improvement Project. It gives us the opportunity to spend our dollars, to divide our dollars, to put our dollars back into the community for improving the project, improving the building, and I think that's the essence of the Renaissance program. Our bids right now, we've had a little time to tweak some things, but we're still well within the guidelines of spending 50% of the current value on the project. We have made some minor changes, and that is pre-building permit with code review. So the footprint of the building is not going to change. The improvements on the interior, it's basically a full remodel. It's just a shell of a building. We are going to, and I think it's in your pictures or in your packet, put an overhang on the front. We've been through the Stark County improvement for the facade improvement, and we qualified for that. But we're hoping to impact the west end of town, hoping to impact the city of Dickinson with the improvement on the building that we're doing. There is some other potential business up on that end, which I think is going to improve the whole west end. You know, again, the gateway that comes into the downtown corridor. Our idea is to keep moving forward, to keep improving, to keep investing in our community. So this, again, allows us the opportunity to free up some dollars over the next 5 years with the exemption on the improvement. The current assessed value is still a fairly substantial value on the building. Our potential savings, again, is not, to the level of other projects, but it is a savings for us, so we appreciate any consideration. We'll entertain any questions as well.
Any questions for Mr. Seiler or Ms. LaFleur?
No questions, but thank God that building's been an eyesore. I mean, and this is exactly what the Renaissance Zone is designed for. I mean, whether you're small or big, this is a perfect project for that.
Yeah. So we look forward to being in the community as well. So.
All right. Any other questions for them, the applicants? Okay, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Mr. Josephson, you want to just touch on the application?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Commissioners. Steve Josephson, planner. This is an application by Infinity Real Estate. They're going to purchase this building. It was the former laundromat. And just to note, this is the first project in the West Villard area when the city commission approved the expansion of the Renaissance, the 5-year expansion of the Renaissance Zone. They also changed the map and expanded down into West Villard, which is further west on West Villard, an area where there are buildings they certainly need some assistance. I did do a site visit, and I could tell you from what I saw, that building is definitely in need of rehabilitation. So the applicants plan to purchase the building and rehabilitate it and move their offices into that location. In addition to the eligible Renaissance Zone costs, they're also going to do improvements to the parking, area, some exterior improvements. The eligible Renaissance Zone costs will be at about $267,000. The current true and full value of the property is $348,000, so it exceeds that 50% for a rehabilitation project. We did get comments from the State Renaissance Zone Coordinator, and this does meet the criteria for the State Renaissance Zone, and it does meet the goals and objectives in the state's Renaissance Zone plan. So this is going to be a fairly extensive building. I can just tell you that in the past, people have spoken to either, Planning Director Hadley or myself about what they could do on this with this project, and the condition of it has been an impediment to people using it. So so this is definitely this is a good project. The tax savings that they stated over 5 years is about $20,000. Anyway, staff recommends approval subject to the findings in the staff report, and we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Josephson. Any questions for Mr. Josephson regarding the application?
One thing I might want to ask the applicants is how many people are going to be employed by your firm when you move in there?
The structure within the real estate brokerage world is a little bit different because there are independent contractors. It's basically a number of small businesses under the umbrella of the brokerage or the larger business. Right now, we are 6 strong, about to be 7. We potentially could grow to 10. But,
Mr. Hadley, you had a comment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I was just going to echo what Stephen said and then amplify it a little bit. I've been on the phone and had people in my office for this particular site and structure since I've been here. And none of the uses could ever really work out. This is a great use for that particular building and the amount of parking that's available and its location. So, it does really fit the model. Not that the first application is a great addition to our city, but this typically is what we really want to see. And the exciting part is we have 2 or 3 other folks that are looking at Renaissance Zone projects since we've put out our advertisement and billing and whatnot. So there seems to be a little more interest on the Villard, West Villard area that we just included. So that is exciting for us. So.
Thank you, Mr. Hadley. Okay, this is a public hearing, so we will open the public hearing regarding this application. If anybody in the public has any comments regarding the application for the Infinity Real Estate, please step forward and make your comments now. Anyone in the public have any comments regarding the application at 1269 West Villard for Renaissance Zone? Please step forward. All right, seeing no comments, we will close the public hearing. And commissioners, any questions, comments for staff or the applicants? If not, I'd look for a motion.
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the Infinity Real Estate Group LLC petition for a Renaissance Zone tax exemption as being compliant with the City of Dickinson's Renaissance Zone Plan as amended effective July 1st, 2019, and with the City of Dickinson Comprehensive Plan, as well as being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussions regarding this application? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the Renaissance project at 1269 West Villard, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, thank you. Item 3 on our agenda today is to consider proposed amendments to the City of Dickinson Municipal Code, Chapter 34, the subdivision of land. Mr. Josephson, you'll kind of give, I think you've been working hard on this, so you'll kind of give, we've seen it a few times, but maybe you'll just give a few comments. Is your mic on? Is your mic on, Steve?
Steve Josephson, planner. I'm going to involve Mr. Planning Director Hadley in this discussion. This discussion too. This has come in front of you before a number of workshops, and you have a memo in front of you that essentially the draft that you have, the regulations are being updated. We've also added a number of definitions. We've revised several existing definitions and removed ghost platting definition from it. The subdivision procedure sections has been changed. We've removed text that duplicates requirements in the city's pre-development check about the city's pre-development checklist. It's also an update of design standards, including adjusted minimum roadway widths to be consistent with the city's transportation master plan, and updated the Parks and Recreation section based on comments from their staff. In addition, there had been discussion about the deposit that the developer would have, and the language that's being proposed by staff is that it stay at 130% of the estimated cost that the developer may be responsible for, but also acknowledging that there may be additional costs. There may be additional costs related to review and inspection fees. Also updated the section regarding acceptance of public improvements, a changed specification for the plat section to reference requirements of the development checklist, and revised the variance section so that hardship variances would be heard by the Planning and Zoning Commission. And this is meant to streamline the process, since the Planning and Zoning Commission is going to be making the recommendation that any requests for this would come to the Planning and Zoning Commission as part of a subdivision application. I'm also going to hand something out. You probably got this. We had received a proposed ordinance from our former city attorney Murtha, who had some comments, and we're still trying to digest some of those comments before bringing this to City Commission. But there were a couple of items that were sent, to Attorney Murtha that weren't incorporated into that draft. So I'm going to go ahead and hand those out.
Stephen, I think they have this.
Oh, they
Yeah.
have that?
Yep.
Okay. All right. And it was just in the section on infrastructure about surety, where it says a 1-year warranty will be provided by the developer and what 130% of the 30% of the bond shall be held to repair any unforeseen failures in any infrastructure. And then the other one, okay, the other one did have to do with fees. So so both Planning Director Hadley and I are here to answer any questions you may have. I know there were some concerns about the previous draft, and we're hoping that the new language addresses some of those concerns. And we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'll just jump in a little bit.
Go ahead, Mr.
Thank you, Stephen. The handout I handed you out was, obviously I made copies yesterday for the City Commission workshop, so I had them, so I didn't let Stephen know that I did that. But anyway, the 130% is what we currently have in the ordinance, so that's a no change. The only real change is that we would keep 30% of that bond to cover any costs similar to what we've had in the past and failures. And the discussion I think has happened that what we've seen is a lot of the damage or a lot of the stuff shows up a year after that. So we have a year warranty, and in the second year or third year, and I don't know if we want to address that or if there's an issue. If we're doing inspections correctly, I think the second change on the bottom, that if the city engineer feels that it's an area that needs further inspection and that we are getting inspections completed, that information will be available, and it might help alleviate any of the failures in that second to 20th year of those roadways and infrastructure that's put in. So that's the idea. The other part is that we have shared with the local engineers, surveyors, and received many comments from one engineering firm and a few comments from a couple others, and we've incorporated as many of those as we possibly felt we could. I think that overall the engineering community, from what we're taking, is on board with what we're doing, and they're kind of a reflection of who works with the process. Obviously they work with us to guide the public through this process, but I think that they're on board with knowing that we're kind of facilitating making this a little cleaner, a little bit more black and white, so people can follow through with it more. So I just wanted to add that in there.
My only question with item D is, how long do we hold that bond for? For infinity, until we decide we want to let it go? I mean,
the intent, and we can further define that in that sentence. That's a good point.
I mean, once
Mr.
we've
Chairman,
accepted the streets, I mean,
I think that when the
we
city
should-
engineer, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt
Yeah.
you, but I mean, when the city engineer actually accepts those public infrastructure improvements that we said that we wanted, when he accepts it, I think that should be the time when it's then either released, that's our choice, or we keep that 30% for a defined period of time that he might have a concern that it may have a failure. So whether it be in a unstable area, or it might be a portion of a project, it's kind of hard to define that. That's where I think that the city engineer's judgment will probably come into play as far as when and how we would disperse that. I guess I don't know if that's how you feel, or if you don't.
well, my question on that is, as a developer, if you're looking at this, you don't ever have an end game or an end date. I mean, once we accept the street, we should be saying that we're satisfied with everything, and we should be releasing the bond. So I don't think we accept the street till the warranty period expires, so that's a year later. But at that time, when we're accepting it, I think that bond should be released. I mean, there's got to be an end game at some point. I mean, this leaves it awfully vague, where if we just, we could keep that bond for 5, 6, 7 years. I mean, the way this is written, I don't know if that's the intention. So,
Not really the intent, I don't believe. I think that the intent was when the infrastructure was completed, all of the bond would be released except for 30%, and then that 30% would be kept for that year, and then if there was any reason to keep it beyond that, but if we don't want to go beyond that year, then we can just say specifically it's going to be kept for that
Well-
warranty period year in case you walk away, and at least we have that money to.
Yeah, I
move
mean,
forward.
if we keep it past the warranty period, then we're extending the warranty. Am I not correct in that?
Chairman Frederick, we've talked about this as a staff, and I think what we're hearing is there is a little bit of, I don't want to say inconsistency, but the intention is once all the improvements are made, then we release the surety back. And why that's important, there's several cases we're getting into where as soon as the street was done, we accepted it and then gave them their surety back and didn't notice that the sidewalks weren't complete or the street lights. And now we're having several issues like that where folks have bought lots and call and say, okay, what are you going to do? Who's going to fix this for us and who's going to finish it? So I think what staff has said is that once all of the improvements are made that were required, that surety should be back, but not until 100% of the improvements are completed.
I mean, for me, I'd like to just see that wording change, that we will accept the streets once the 1-year warranty period is expired and your surety will be released. I just think there has to be an end date to that. I mean, if there's problems during that 1-year warranty period, then maybe we can have language in there that we're going to hold the bond longer, but I mean, once we accept it, we're taking the street, so I don't know why we would continue to hold somebody's surety if.
I think as long as the other improvements, if there's anything else in the development agreement, like lighting and stuff.
And I agree, and
then it would be.
I agree totally on that. And I know we have these situations where lights didn't get put in, mailboxes didn't get put in, and we're trying to avoid that. It's just, by us leaving this vague like this, that it basically is extending the warranty period, in my opinion.
So if we added a statement that talked about the surety being released once all agreed upon improvements are completed and accepted?
Accepted by the city. I think that gives them an end game. Then they know, by looking at this, that until everything in their development agreement is satisfied, they're not getting their surety back.
Good. I think that covers the staff issues too. So we'll add that.
Yeah, and I think the one, just to add on to that too, the bottom number 4 under fees also helps with that whole issue, because some of the projects that we're dealing with now didn't have very good inspection, and I don't want to really speak for the engineering department, but I guess I'm going to, just because from the standpoint of how we work together, if the city engineer requires some additional inspections during, challenging sites, whatnot, then we are having a certified engineer review and inspect that development as it's being put in. And so we also have that, which we don't have currently on the table. So I guess,
I agree with that.
I think that would alleviate that whole concern. We were just trying to cover some of the holes that we felt we had in our system before. And I think, yes, I agree with you that, keeping that through the warranty period and then releasing it and just being done. But if there was an inspection that said it was done correctly and it was done to code, and then it fails, then we still have that to go back on to follow up with, I guess, from the city standpoint.
So, in that scenario, you're saying, so in 18 months, if there's a failure, we're going to go back and after the developer?
No,
even though we accepted it?
Not necessarily after developer. We may go ask questions to the contracted engineering firm that said that it was done to code, and want to look at that information and say, this road failed, this sewer failed, this whatever. Could we see the log and the information that you have that showed the inspection and the improvement of that? And that's where we have a hole right now. We don't have that. So I think it still protects the city from the standpoint of, if it shows that it was done correctly and maybe it was just a flaw and a problem, whatever, then we could just say, okay, it was done correctly from the notes and the log that we have. But right now, we don't have that ability. We have some sewer and water lines that were installed in areas that aren't developed, that were previously approved subdivisions, that we have no idea what's there. And I don't know that that's really what we want either. So it's kind of protect that other side of developments that maybe go in or they partially go in, and we know what's actually in there, and it gives the city engineer some latitude to say this is an area of concern. I do, and it doesn't mean we're going to have inspections on everything. It means that if he has a concern, that he can actually say, this is what he would like to have, and he would like to have some additional, or if he has concerns that it's not going to get finished, that he would have
But-
the surety from someone else there inspecting it as it's being done. I guess that's the only intent.
But then, we wouldn't accept it. Is that not my understanding? If we have concern that something isn't done or not done correctly, why would we accept it? If we have inspection reports, the warranty period expires, and we're happy with it, that we accept it, then it should be over. Then it's on us, because we accepted it. Why do we keep dragging it out farther?
We're not really dragging it out further, it's just information that we have available.
That's what I'm saying. But in 18 months, let's say we have a failure of a street, but we've already accepted it, who are we going to go back after? I mean,
Well, it isn't even saying that we'll go back after. I mean, I'll give you an example. The downtown project that I'm doing, we have as-built, supposedly, from the 90s when that was done. They aren't worth the paper they're on, just because they do not show in any detail what actually is out there and what actually I'm running into when we do trees and lights and whatnot. So if nothing else, it provides us with some information that we can put in our database that we can use 30 years from now and say, well, this was put in, this is what was put in, this is how it was put in, and we had someone that actually inspected it. And so it isn't necessarily to go after anyone. It's really just also just kind of a surety blanket or comfort zone, knowing that it was done correctly, because I don't believe the engineering staff has the staff to go out and be standing there watching it. So that really is it's to give them their professional ability to look at another certified engineer, licensed engineer in the state of North Dakota that was there, reviewed it, approved it, and said it was done correctly to our code. Similar to what we do now with our contract engineering. But that's exactly what we're doing now. We're actually asking another licensed engineer in the state of North Dakota to look at all of the information that's coming through, whether it be you or city commission, and making sure that it meets the state standards and our city standards. So it really isn't to go after anyone in the future, it's really just to kind of protect our interest.
Mr. Hadley, does that ability extend beyond the 1-year period?
That's an attorney question, honestly. It probably does. It probably does in some fashion.
So my question is, your example of the construction that was done in the 90s, is there an ability with this language to charge somebody for the review from 30 years ago?
No, not because we didn't have this, we didn't have anything in
Okay,
place.
but in the future,
Yeah, but a road failure that was inspected, that we hired someone to inspect, that was done this year, and it was inspected, said it was done to our quality of whatever we needed to be done, and whatever the improvements needed to be done. 3 years from now, major failures, maybe flaws in materials or flaws in sewer materials or whatever that transpires, it doesn't mean that we couldn't ask some questions at that point, in my opinion. I'm not a city attorney, don't want to be, but I think that it does leave the door open for us to ask questions down the road if there's major failures.
who are we going to ask?
That engineer first.
But I mean, I don't think that,
but the way I read this is not recovering costs for failures. This is only recovering costs to review.
Right, that's correct.
We're not going after.
but let's say in your situation 3 years later, who are we going to charge these fees to?
Whoever the developer is.
And what's going to obligate them to pay it once we've accepted the streets?
No. The fee will be paid, it'll be part of their development agreement, so it'll be part of their fees, it'll be part of the package that you see when it comes to you. It'll be condition number 8, that additional engineering fees are being required by the city engineer for this, and this, and shall be paid prior to the start of construction, basically.
So what if we don't do these in future inspections? Then what if we don't do these inspections and we don't deem them necessary? What do we do with the fee then?
If the city engineer doesn't deem that we need to do those inspections, we don't charge them, and we don't have them. So it's at his discretion on whether or not we need that.
But in all cases, they'll be identified upfront.
That's correct.
They would be identified.
It would be
Pre-construction.
identified long before this meeting for consideration. So it could be discussed at that point. Questions could be asked to the city engineer.
So,
Why do we feel that we need this? And so, I mean, yeah, it's not going to pop up after the fact. It would be part of the discussion.
I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So we charge the developer a fee to develop his property for this future inspections. Nothing happens for 5 years. So we call the developer back and say, here's your feedback? I mean, I don't understand.
The fee-
Or 7 years down the road, all of a sudden we have a failure, so then we have that fee we took from them to investigate why it failed. I mean, so we're taking a fee and holding it until we might or might not need this.
No.
I don't, my understanding is they're not collecting the fee. They're just saying
But
that,
I'm just saying, we'll never collect the fee. The developer's not gonna pay it 5 years down the road. He's not
Yeah.
gonna, if you call him back and say, oh, we got a failure here, that fee we talked about, you gotta come pay it. I mean,
No. The fee, and here's the intent. The fee is to say, if we're going to hire, Andrew's here, we'll use him as an example, because he's here, we can pick on him. Highlands Engineering, we have a big development in that Bible Church project that we just looked at that's in the ETZ. Somebody wants to annex that and develop it all. We hire Highlands Engineering to review and inspect the work that's being done out there on site. That's the fee.
but I think we have that now. We have our review fees already in our ordinance.
We have review fees, but this is defined specifically for this.
So, okay, so we're gonna take this fee no matter what, even if we use it or not.
If the city, no. If the city engineer deems that we need those inspections, we will collect the fee. It's all triggered on his or her direction on, do we need inspection in this area? Someone comes in with I'll use that same example, the Bible Church expansion. We don't need any engineering review there. So we would not collect a fee. We would not go through this process. I guarantee you, Craig would not have charged a fee for that project. But the rest of that site probably would, as it was developed. Because it's a lot bigger impact on everybody that's around it and all of our infrastructure. So probably would require a fee for site review during construction of that site. So it's going to be, he's going to have to make that call long before that development comes to you for approval for a preliminary, final plat, whatever, before it goes any further.
But if you step up, I mean, if you step up to number 3, all fees established by this section are in addition to any sums paid to cover the cost of review of improvement plans, field inspection of construction that is required under the chapter of the provisions of the Dickinson Code. Isn't that basically the same thing? I mean, we're saying that,
We're saying if in his opinion that we need additional help, inspection, plan review, maybe there's stuff that Craig isn't as versed in, maybe they don't have time, maybe whatever, it's meant to take the burden or the cost off of the taxpayers, honestly, for reviewing proposed developments using taxpayer money to review development that the city does not have either staff or ability to do at that time, and make the developer pay for that rather than going to the taxpayers and saying, your tax money is going to be used to review and approve and inspect a development that they may or may not want, honestly. You know, that's the idea behind it. They're actually paying, and that's the whole idea of all of our fees, are basically the fees for the developments that go through our process right now. It's meant to offset the cost for the city to process it, whether it be my time, Stephen's time, Brandy's time, publication time. It's meant to offset it so the community is not paying for that. The person that wants to do it, whether it be a daycare or a 200 lot subdivision.
Are we talking the same thing here? You're kind of talking about fees in advance,
In-
pre-project. And I think, Mr. Chairman, you're talking about a failure that occurs 5 years down the road. Are we talking?
Well, that's what we're trying
apples
to,
apples?
We are tied together, I mean, in that the information that we obtain, if the city engineer requires us to get this, requires a developer to go through this, then we are getting information that shows exactly what's in the ground, how it was done, when it was done, the conditions, the material, all of that. We're getting that information that we don't have. Can we use that 5 years down the road? Yeah, we obviously can, just because it is information that we have. Am I going to say we are going to use it? Am I going to say it is going to be a legal issue? No, I'm saying that it is information that we could use. And it also gives the city engineer the comfort zone of knowing it was done to the best of our ability to meet the intent of our code. That really is the issue.
Right. At that point, 5 years down the road, there's nothing left to be paid.
Right.
The-
No.
The
Yeah.
work's been done, fee's been charged up front. There's no additional charges to go after anybody in 5
I know, but he said if we don't use it, we're gonna give it back.
Well, no, because the work would be done up front
The work could be done during construction, during the work.
during construction, and then the fee would be
But
charged at that time.
I understand
if
the
it's
chairman's
necessary.
point. How about if it's not done?
I mean, I just don't like.
Then we don't accept it.
I don't like writing ordinances where you have discretionary fees. So one developer's gonna get charged this fee and one developer's not. If
Depends
we're gonna
on-
charge a fee, then everybody gets charged the fee.
I think what we have to look at here is what we're talking about inspecting public improvements. So if a project was just a building on a site, that's one type of project this fee wouldn't apply to. If you're doing public infrastructure, because really what this was written for, staff wanted a bigger surety up front. Does that really do anything once we release that, when we close the streets? No. What we need to do is better due diligence up front. There were several streets that were put in during the time we call the boom that we weren't doing this because there were so many going on, and we can't verify that they were built according to those specs that were approved. We don't know that water line is exactly where it is. So now things start happening 2, 3, 5 years later, and we may have to go in and fix it, but we need a pretty good idea that it was done the way it was done. So that's where it comes in. If you're going to be doing street and public infrastructure, we should hire someone up front, whether it be our staff or somebody outside, that knows that it was done that way, so that when we release the surety back, we say, hey, we know you did what you did, because we get this now 5 years later, when the street fails, we can all say, I don't know what happened, because we all were there, we saw that we did the inspections, we have the records, we all feel it was okay. Instead of now, we go, well, then something must have been done wrong. So
As-
it really does help the developer up front.
As part of our plan, as far as I know, and it's been a while, but as far as I know, we already charge the developer for inspection fees. And I just don't like a discretionary fee. Joe Blow developer comes in, we're gonna charge him a fee because this is a hilly land. This developer comes in over here and we're not gonna charge him a fee. So if we're gonna charge a fee, we're gonna charge everybody a fee, is my opinion on it, for the inspections.
Well,
And I think we already charged that fee. I think this is over and above. I think we already charge an inspection fee to review the engineers.
well,
I
then,
mean, that's part of the whole the
so if
process.
that's the case, because really fees, the amount of the fee is set by the city commission. So if that fee's there, then staff can review that and recommend if that's sufficient or not.
I don't know what that, I mean, I don't know if we have a set number, but, I think we can have some verbiage in there that if, we're gonna charge these inspection fees to everybody, but if it's in the case that it's gonna be extraordinary, you got really bad soil or something like that, and there's gonna be additional inspections needed, I think that can be taken care of in the development agreement.
Well,
We're gonna know that up front.
And I think you're right, and I think we're kind of saying the same thing. It's just you're concerned that, and I agree with you that it's discretionary. It's not discretionary. If you have infrastructure that's going to be turned over to the city, that fee's in there. Maybe that's how we should write it, exactly that way. If you don't have public, it's a public infrastructure review fee.
Yeah, I mean, the way it's written, in some cases, additional fees may be
Yeah,
charged.
so we could change that to be for infrastructure, public infrastructure. Because that's really what it's for.
But I think if we look back, we already charged that fee.
So we'll take a look at that. And, like I said, kind of like Walter
Guys?
said,
Come on up. Any comments? You guys deal with this all the time.
Yeah, Andrew Schrank with Highlands Engineering. I guess I agree with what Mr. Gaz is saying. It's really with public infrastructure, that's when these fees should apply. You know, the city has specifications for earthwork, for aggregate base, for concrete, for asphalt, and it tells you how often you have to do testing, how often you have to do these inspections. So that's basically what the contractor is building to. You know, whether you hire the contractor, whether you hire the engineer, whether the city's doing that testing, as long as it's built to those specifications, it's saying it was built to your standards. And that applies just to the public infrastructure, like Mr. Gah is saying. I also agree with what you're saying, Mr. Friddick. If there is public infrastructure, it's nice for the developers to know, what is this review fee going to be? What's this inspection fee going to be? If we come in blind and say you have $1 million development and we don't know what the city fee is going to be, it's hard for them to budget. Is it $100,000? Is it $300,000? So it'd be great if you guys could somehow set that as maybe a percentage of the improvement cost. If we have $1 million, maybe that's a 10% fee. That way it's equal across the board to every developer based on the amount of public infrastructure that they have in place.
And I think that's where I was going. I just don't like a discretionary. You know, the number is out in orbit, you know. Why did we charge this guy a fee and why we didn't charge this guy a fee? I mean, if we're doing public infrastructure, there should be one fee, and that's
we just need to add that specificness. Because remember, this is an ordinance that's going to apply to lots of different types of projects. So if it's a project that has public infrastructure, so we could just label this fee the public infrastructure review fee.
I agree.
And just one other comment with respect to your bonding and when to release those bonds. You know, one thing to consider, many of these projects get phased. You know, you might put in water and sewer 1 year, a couple years down the road, you might do the streets. You're saying you're holding that bond till all infrastructure is in place. If somebody gets water and sewer in, and we look 5 years ago, a lot of people had water and sewer in, and the boom hit, or the boom collapsed, and that's sitting there now. Are you holding the bonds for stuff that's already in place, or can they get that portion of the bond back? Items like that are just maybe items for discussion. So,
I think the
right.
intent, Andrew, if I can just jump in, Mr. Chairman, I think the intent of the whole idea of the bonds is that we do have some subdivisions that were entitled on the ground, no sewer, no water, surely can sell a lot out there, but you can't build out there. And so, you know, the intent and how typically my past history of working different areas, if you're going to do a subdivision that has 25 lots, boom, bust, whatever, it doesn't really make any difference to the city. It's not, this isn't based on financial stuff with the city. The city has accepted a development. And if it had 25 lots and they said it was going to have sewer, water, roads, streetlights, and those aren't there, and the bus comes, we've witnessed that, and we have ones on the ground right now that do not have that public infrastructure there. So if we release that bond just because they did the sewer, let's say, and I can point to one right now, we have sewer, water, fire hydrants, and some curbing in one, have no idea what's there. It's entitled, people can build on it, but who is then responsible to put the roads in? Because if we release that, we should just go in and put the roads in. And if we want to block off the roads and say, okay, this is an area that we're not plowing, we're not maintaining, we're not doing anything with, my opinion is that we should cash that bond in and finish it, because we've given that entitlement to that land, and people have the right to actually, they have the right, once we record that, they have the right to sell those lots. And so if I buy a lot, I have the right to say, come to the city and say, I want to build on that.
Wow.
And the first thing I'm going to say is, where's my road? So I think that we need to look beyond that and say, yes, we're holding someone's bond, but if they haven't finished all the improvements that we've approved, for the public infrastructure, for that entitlement, then I think it is valid that we have that, and we cash that bond in, and we have city engineering build a road, if that's the case. But we haven't done that.
But I think we have in here that we won't issue building permits unless it's done, isn't,
No, I think we got rid of that, because I think.
building
that was
permits
our-
are still in here, no, occupancy certificates are gone. But there, there's not a road to the property that you're building, it says right in here, we won't issue a building permit, so isn't that,
And Mr. Chairman, I guess I would, with Mr. Hadley's comment there, I would tend to agree with that, as long as it was specified in a development agreement or something that this development had to completed by this date. You know, a lot of these developments, they don't really have a time frame set to them, so that guy can come back in 20 years, build that road and sell those lots, as long as he's not selling lots. I guess my question was, if they put in water this year, they come back in 20 years and do the road, can they have, if they have this water and sewer put in per the city specifications, they have as-built, they have everything that they are required to have, can they ask for acceptance of that water and sewer, get that portion of the bond released, still have a bond for the streets, you know, because it was kind of a phased development? Or if you look at these 500 lot subdivisions that come in 5 phases, can they get phase 1 released and still have phase 2, 3, 4, 5 held by the city? That was more what I was
And
asking
I
for the
think that
bonds.
would be acceptable as long as the city engineer agreed that those were put in, and same thing, the inspections and everything, that we're okay with that, then I guess the answer would be yes. But that would have to be agreed upon, and it could be done during that process. And, you know, I think that, you know, the planning commission and the city commission should probably be aware if that is happening, so they also are involved in that, so they know that, hey, yes, this has been done, but we're still waiting on this. So this project will not be moving forward until this, either we build the road, let's just use the road as the last thing that came in, because that's probably what it would be. We cash in the bond and do that, or do we just hold it and wait for a while and see if they're gonna come back? I mean, that's also another question. How long do we just sit there and hold a bond that is for those improvements and not go out and build it? Because we definitely don't want to release it, because they may never come back.
I think what's important to note here is specific parameters and development agreements are very important. So if we specify that it's got to be done by a certain date, if not, we could use that surety and continue it, that's it. That's what's gotten us into trouble, is when the development agreement doesn't specify that. So again, that's beyond this. That's kind of the inner workings of this subdivision ordinance, but not necessarily laid out in the ordinance.
yeah, if you look at section 34.060, number 3, no building permit shall be issued by the city except where the requirements of this chapter have been satisfied. No building permit shall be issued by the city unless a street giving access to such proposed structure is an existing street, or unless such street appears to be on a recorded plat. At the filing for the application for a building permit, applicant shall submit the sufficient surety has been posted for completion of the public improvements. So, I mean, we're not gonna give a building permit unless it's done, is basically the way I read that. Okay. Mr. Schneider?
Scott Schneider with Apex Engineering Group. I was just going to comment on I think some of the background on this is that it's really a good thing that the fees are being upfront with the developers, because in the past, if the developers were just supposed to do this work, and the engineering community understood that they wanted it done, but the developer doesn't want to pay the engineer to do it. So then the engineering community was always in a hard situation. Can't speak for Andrew and his firm, but we don't do a lot of this work. But if you're always trying to work with your developer on, well, we need to do this, but he doesn't want to pay me, then you're not going to go out and do it. And so it's always put the engineering community in a hard position when it wasn't a requirement of this chapter. But I do agree with you, Mr. Chairman, on it shouldn't be discretionary. I think it should be just all of them for the public infrastructure piece.
Okay. Any
So
other
we
com-
should work
Oh.
with, so, I mean, the answer, I guess, to move forward with this would be that we come up with a percentage of, I think Andrew brought that up, a percentage of what the public infrastructure cost is, And, I think miscellaneous is usually like 7 to 10 to 12% or whatever on projects that they're involved with. So maybe we come up with some number that's in there, in that range, and move forward. But I think we can get, between Craig and these two gentlemen, if nothing else, we could probably have a percentage that we plug in there that would be what we would keep. So I think that,
I think for you guys and for everybody, you should be able to read this and know exactly where you're going to be at. Not discretionary fees and things at the opinion of one person. If there's I think if we're going to do it, that's the way we need to do it, so. Thoughts, anyone? Any other items in here you guys have any comments on?
The only thing is on section 34060, the spelling error on any infrastructure.
Yeah, ante?
Just make sure we correct that.
Yeah. Andrew, did you have anything else, or this is the time?
I'll just bring up a couple other things. Mr. Hadley had sent us out a couple months ago for comments. We gave him several comments, and he's incorporated a lot of those. I think there's a lot of great changes in here. It really meets what your process is today versus what it was 10 years ago when the subdivision ordinance is written. So I think it is a great change. A couple comments just for maybe discussion here. One was right-of-way and street widths. I'm not sure where it ended up in the current version, but at the time we had seen this, a lot of these right-of-way widths were quite a bit wider than we've been used to. A residential road was typically 66. I think at one time it was up to 77. I think it may be back to 70 feet now. Just want to make sure that's what you guys want. Keep in mind you're losing 4 feet of taxable property, and your street widths, the wider the street, the less taxable property you have, the more maintenance you have, and the more street cost you have. So keeping those down to a minimum is really critical for tax dollars. It helps you save your tax dollars. So just something maybe for discussion. I don't know how close you guys looked at those. I think we already talked about the bonding, the applications. The other question was, I'm not sure where we ended up on the HOAs. There was a lot of discussion on previous versions about homeowners associations for stormwater maintenance, and I think we've all seen the issues with homeowners associations. One comment we had regarding that, or one option we had talked about, or we presented in our comments, was potentially the city taking ownership of these ponds. And then you obviously have the maintenance of that. But what you could do is charge perhaps a stormwater fee to each lot in the subdivision. Maybe it's $10 a month, almost like a water sewer service fee. And that goes to your mowing, your cleaning out of that pond. Then you're not trying to track down an HOA. You have each individual lot owner paying for that maintenance. When the developer is there, he's paying it. When he owns all those lots, he's paying that fee. And you guys actually have a means of collecting that fee. So just a comment there, maybe a better option than HOAs if that's something you want to explore. Otherwise, like I say, I think the changes look great for the most part, and we're on board with it. So,
thanks, Andrew.
I think Andrew.
I have a question for Andrew. On some of these developments that we're putting in for Scott too, these ponds that we continue to have issues with, how much more in the future as we develop these areas, if these ponds are designed to actually hold water, not be a swamp, but actually hold water, much like if you go to the rec center, you have that pond there by the Mustang field that actually holds water. How much would you think that, additional cost to build something like that, rather than we just continue to build these wetlands that are unmanageable? You think it's significant cost in a development?
I think what he's looking at is there a better option.
Right.
Well, I think we've all seen the nice ponds with the water features in the larger towns, and they do add dollars to the infrastructure and to the development. And we have some challenging soils in our area that do make it challenging to build those water features into our soils. Sometimes our soils won't hold water, so then that's an added cost to bring in soil that's going to keep that water.
A pit liner?
Yeah, those are going to add significant costs to a project. As you know, a couple meetings ago at the City Commission, there was a task order to start looking at the stormwater ordinance, and all of that is going to be part of that discussion on what should these ponds look like for these developments. And at what point should a pond be a larger regional pond that serves more than one small subdivision, that you can assess those costs over a larger development area and not have to put all the burden on one landowner for a water feature that's expensive to construct.
But my concern is, okay, so we go to the one larger regional pond. Now we just made a big swamp.
Yeah.
Instead of a bunch of small swamps that are unmanageable and, you know, we can't maintain. Now we just have a huge swamp that is an eyesore.
I mean, if you take a look up at like where the hospital's at, you look at their ponds, they're dry 90% of them. You can't mow them. They're steep, they got rocks all over them. So, I mean,
And that's one of the pieces of the stormwater ordinance will be maintenance concerns, so minimum of a 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 slope, so they are mowable. Get rid of the rocks on the side slope so they can be maintained. Those will all be part of that ordinance update. You know, and stormwater is always kind of the last piece of the development world. You work in it a lot. It's expensive because you have to give up land, but you know, unfortunately, not unfortunately, but for the protection of the environment and the downstream landowners, that's why we have stormwater ordinances, and we're of course held to pretty high standards from the EPA on treating that water, and that just causes a lot of land to have to be used for stormwater control.
But even if you put a mowable sidewall on it, you're still dealing with.
The bottom's always going to be
the
challenged.
bottom
Absolutely.
Are still ugly swamps.
And there's some things you can do. The ponds that you're talking about are referred to as a retention pond. They actually retain the water, but they really don't provide much buffer or your discharges. That's really just a water feature is all that does. It's not providing a function. So on top of that, we typically build detention ponds where it's releasing runoff and it's storing. So your water level is fixed on the bottom. It's not really storing any water. And then during a rain event above that, your water level will fluctuate and it's going to store that added capacity and discharge it at pre-development rates. So really that retention is basically just a water feature because it's lined, it's not infiltrating. You get a little bit of evaporation, but it's not enough to really even take into your calculations. With the pond bottoms, we can slope the pond bottoms a little bit. They don't have to be flat. However, it does take more area then to get that same volume. So to get the volume, we a lot of times will just make that bottom as flat as possible so it takes up the least amount of real estate possible, because that's what we hear from the developers. We don't want to lose any property. So we could have maybe a minimum 1-2% slope requirement on the bottom so that it slopes towards the outlet, and really you have a little bit of water at the outlet that might collect, but otherwise it is draining towards the outlet. So
and then
that would be an
should
option.
dry out then.
And really, some of these ponds, why even mow them? You know, if we plant these as wetlands, let them look like a wetland, in my opinion, they look nicer sometimes. They filter out some of the sediments, the oils. They actually do a better job of water quality if you just let them go. Let them look like a wetland, let them look natural.
Well,
That's
and
an
I
option
agree
too.
if it looks like a wetland
Right.
and it doesn't look like a forest of weeds, noxious weeds. And that's what we have in a lot of these.
And that's a fine line. To make that happen, it's a fine line.
And one of the options that we'll be exploring too, to try and get rid of that nuisance water in those ponds, is the slope like Andrew talked about, but also a trickle channel. So we have those low flows from people watering their lawns, because that we get runoff even when it's dry because people water their lawns, they wash their cars. We get that little bit of water coming all the time. We call it a base flow. We can pour a small concrete valley gutter in the bottom of the pond so that water moves through a pond and doesn't sit there and make it swampy. So that's an option we can look at too.
Okay.
If I can just add to that discussion too, and I'm sure these gentlemen are familiar with it, is over the last, I don't know when our stormwater ordinance was adopted, but there have been a number of best management practices that have been developed over the last couple of decades so that you don't run into the situations that, you know, that Mayor Decker is talking, you know, is talking about, and that includes some of the options that y'all, you know, mentioned today.
And Mr. Chairman, I guess just to touch on that too, excuse me, as far as the HOAs go, you're losing all control of what these ponds look like by doing an HOA. At that point, it's up to the HOA to decide what's an acceptable pond. if you guys did take over these ponds, it's up to you guys to say, what should these ponds look like? And is it acceptable to our standards, not the developer, not the HOA, not the people that live out there? So something to consider.
And I think just Mr. Chairman, the intent, I think the intent that city engineering has in that discussion was that we're going to do the more regional, the more localized. The city is going to be more involved and actually take active ownership of those and move forward. Similar to other discussions we had today about development agreements and follow-up on things, we can point to a number of localized stormwater ponds that are not regional, that do not work, and they're not being maintained by the HOA because we didn't put that in their development agreement, and so it winds up being a unfunded, no one really wants it, so then it winds up coming back to the city. And it may be a stormwater pond that serves 12 houses, really, the equivalent of 12 houses. So I think we want to get out of that game too, because that, if we wind up taking over every small stormwater retention pond, you know, and you think about whether it be a mall or whether it be whatever, I don't know that we want to be in that game either, but I think the regional ones, I think, is where Craig and engineering is actually going on, that we probably would just take those over from now on and do that. And I mean, I think that's, you know, your discussions with him, Scott, I mean, just so this board knows, I think that's where it's going. The small localized ones, I don't think we have any intent in being involved in them, except for probably maybe having a little more control on what they look like and the maintenance of them in the development agreement, which we haven't had in the past.
So you're talking like an individual building?
Individual buildings, or like a small, you know, like a small condo project that has 5 buildings or 10 buildings in it, and they have a little pond at the, on their site. I don't know that the city, where that water goes from their pond leaving, yes, we have control and we want to be in control of that, but not little small localized ponds. I don't know that you really want to get into that, because your stormwater program and staff would have to be triple of what it is.
Well, I know my history of the HOAs has not been good. Shirley?
I would agree. They always say, well, we'll wait until all the lots are sold and then we'll form a HOA. Well, it doesn't work, because then no one wants to be the president or the secretary, because then everybody hates you, you know, and trying to collect money from all the homeowners. I would agree with your plan of just charging everybody $10 a month.
And if they don't pay their fee, then the HOA has to go after them legally, and all they can really do is put an assessment on their property. I mean, these HOAs just, they don't work around here for some reason. I mean, you go to the bigger cities, they have companies that manage the HOAs. I mean, that's what they do. I mean, around here, we just don't have any of that kind of stuff. So, I mean, the HOA thing is, I think the ponds, I like what Mr. Schrank said, you know, maybe that each development has, I mean, can we put that on the water bill? Is that something we can charge a fee to just a certain residents?
You can have stormwater fees, and that's, again, that's the stormwater ordinance that's going to be reviewed next. That's not really in this, but you're right. I think I have a meeting later on today that I suspect the concern is one of those ponds isn't being maintained. So it is an issue that we're addressing.
Well, and I think we've had some subdivisions in the past, these guys might be aware that the water's discharging at a higher rate than the pond maybe wasn't even built correctly, and, you know, flooding people downstream. And I mean, I think there's been issues all over like that. And now that HOA is non-existent, so who do we go after? I mean, there's nobody to go after. So then we end up doing it ourselves. So, anyway. Any other questions or concerns regarding this, guys? Sorry to drag it out so long, but there's a lot of stuff here, so.
Commissioner Frederick, it was reminded to me that while we've had significant discussion here and you've asked the engineers their opinion, haven't officially opened a public hearing yet, so you may want to do that.
Okay, let's do that. All right, if there's anybody in the public that would like to come up and make comments regarding Chapter 34 subdivision proposed changes, this is the time. Seeing nobody in the public, we'll close the public hearing. And I guess the only other comment I had is just quick, the variances. Are we going to codify that? I think by changing this here, that conflicts with some other areas of our,
Yeah, there will likely be some additional reviews and changes from this.
because I think by taking it from the variance, or that committee to us is going to conflict somewhere else in our chapters, so. Is it,
Sorry, I'm writing that down. The fees, we're gonna work on
the codify part of it, I mean, Mr. Schwinn?
Mr. Chairman, board members, I spoke with Mr. Hadley as far as variances in another section in the code, chapter 39. We do have a board of adjustment that hears variances. As far as the verbiage here, with working with the building code and everything, when you reference other sections in the building code, when you actually put the word variances here, if you were doing a search, it brings up different areas in the municipal code also. I spoke with Mr. Hadley yesterday. This particular variance pertains to new plots, is my understanding, and possibly the verbiage here should probably reflect that, which would leave the other Board of Adjustment and those hearing those variances intact.
So new development variances, perhaps.
I mean, it'd be something that they would need a variance when they're bringing their plat in. You know, not just somebody wants to build a shed on a bigger lot, you know? I mean, so,
no. We'd like to leave those with Leonard.
yeah, so I think maybe we just need to look at that verbiage and maybe Jan can
Sure.
fix that, but. Thank you. All right. Anything else, commissioners? Are we taking a formal motion on this today? To approve it, to send it?
Can I
Yep.
just review the four things
Yep.
I wrote down that concerns. Right-of-way street widths, I think, just to address that, and I'm glad Andrew brought it up, I mean, I think that was a discussion 2-3 years ago, when we talked about maybe making our right-of-ways smaller. We have some, and Stephen can talk about what we have as far as in the plan too. We talked about lessening those. We did have some pretty good discussions on that. It never really went anywhere. So if we do want to have a discussion on that, this would be a great time to have it. So I appreciate Andrew bringing it up again, but we did have that and it didn't really go anywhere.
I think at one time, wasn't the talk, the reason they wanted to go to 70s, so the boulevards were just a little bit bigger for,
That was the intent, I believe, yes.
because they've always been 66 as far as I,
Yes, commissioners, and that's why I believe it's reflected that way in the comprehensive plan. Is they actually have a diagram of what a local street would look like, and that would encompass that 70 feet.
I mean,
It just reflects the comprehensive plan policy.
have we,
But again, whatever is more practical is worth considering.
are we just talking 70 feet of right of way, but we're not changing our street width, are we? So, I mean, you're taking that extra footage out of taxable value and future maintenance, I guess, but, I mean, that's,
You could, I mean, in what we just talked about with the variance process as well, you could entertain a 70-foot right-of-way with 20-foot wide boulevards and a much smaller street as far as being improved, if it was acceptable, if it was something
I don't know.
that fit with where you wanted, where that development was. We have some in town that obviously.
we went there, I don't know if we'll ever go there again, so.
Mr. Hadley, let's go through your list, because I'm thinking what might be best is there's some things that I think need to go back, and planning and engineering need to make sure they're on the same page. And I think there were, the 3 or 4 things you brought up were somewhat significant. So I think taking that back to staff for final review and bringing it back to this board at the next meeting is appropriate. you've had your public hearing, so you can kind of review it, kind of do somewhat of a second reading,
Sure.
so to speak.
Or we can continue
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
hearing.
You want to go through your items and make sure we
Yeah,
got?
the second one was HOA, stormwater, regional, city, local HOA, just to clarify that. Third one was percent on the fees for review and inspection, that we're going to figure out what that actually would be and what would be reasonable for everyone. Knowing full and well that, I mean, I think these two will agree, it's pretty tough to pick a fee. I mean, we do that all the time. We have fees for stuff that we lose money on our process, and we have fees that we actually make money on. And I think, these two gentlemen will probably nod their head and say, it's going to be really tough to say 8.25% will cover everything you ever do. So we do need to realize that when we say that, there will be projects that we have that cost the city more than 8%, and there will be projects that cost 7% to review. So
I mean, I think that's understandable. I mean,
yeah, I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. So we will come up with a fee between engineering and these gentlemen, welcome to be involved, and I think they should be, to pick that number.
I mean, when we do the review and we see the scope of the project, can't we determine how much inspection will be needed and have an idea for what that fee is going to cost the developer and put it in the development agreement?
I think,
Once we see the scope, I mean, if you're doing 300 acres or if you're doing 100 acres, it might,
I think you can, but as I said with the downtown, there's always unforeseen things. That's why in projects that they do, there's a miscellaneous percentage that covers all of those things. And those items you can't document up front until you're actually out there doing it. So I think that's the variable. As long as we're aware that we're going to probably pick a number, there's going to be a percentage from here to here, we're going to pick this one, and there may be times when this would actually be the cost to do it. And we're not asking then to go back after the developer and say, well, this actually costs 11% instead of 8. I just want to make sure that you folks know that would be the case. And I think that's fair to say that will
Yeah.
happen.
that's an issue.
And then the new plat variance that Leonard was mentioning, yes, we talked yesterday afternoon at the work session, the commission work session, and yeah, that was kind of already on the list, that obviously variances would only pertain to new plats being presented to this board.
Okay.
That's my list, unless you have anything else.
I didn't have anything else. All right. So we don't need to take action? We'll just, do we need to table it? I guess I'd look for a motion to table it then, till the next meeting.
I'll make that motion to table it.
Motion by Shirley, do we have a second?
Second.
Brad? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, it looks like we don't have any work session items on the agenda. Is there anything, items not on the agenda that anybody would like to discuss? This is the time. Seeing none?
I have a question.
Okay.
Sundance Coves, almost all the lots are sold. Now they're starting to sell off the townhouses. When are they going to put the streetlights in? That's a question we have as we're selling those homes. Where are the streetlights? And I know that wasn't part of their developing project that they were supposed to put them in.
Well, I can tell you what I know. Lights should have been there. There was another good example of we coulda, woulda, shoulda had those lights in the ground when the road was put in. There was discussion with the developer through city engineering to get those put in and fix some road problems and other issues, and that developer has since left town. I think the intent for the developer is to sell off all of the multifamily units as individual condos or townhome type products, and that's great, but unfortunately they need a condo plat to do that. And so what they've been informed by me is that isn't going to take place until the rest of those items are taken care of for the development. So at this point, that condo plat isn't going to move forward for individual sales of those. until they come back to the table, and I haven't heard from them for 3 months, probably.
They have 2 of them listed.
No, they don't have a condo platform.
That's what my question was. I'm not the lister. I'm just telling one
They have
of,
2 of the townhomes listed?
hmm?
They have townhomes listed out there?
2 of them.
The whole buildings or
No, individual.
individual?
And then I'm just closing on the bench.
I believe there's a state law against that. too.
Well, and then the
Well,
reason my
somebody-
buyers are asking me when are the
Staff needs
streetlights
to-
going in on the last
Yeah.
adventure home that I'm closing on Friday, and I'm going like, I know they have to do them, and I think the only teeth we have is you cannot sell them off, like you said, until those streetlights are in, because people are concerned. It's dark out there.
Well, I've probably talked to 20 residents out there and highly encourage them to establish their HOA, ask those questions of the developer, and also be involved in this process and involved in the fact that they want to do the condo. Most of those people want those to go to condos for individual ownership rather than tenants. They would rather do that, but at this point, I have no leverage whatsoever to make them form it. It's got to be an internal thing, and they can do it. I've given them a canned version and told them that I would literally host a meeting here at City Hall if they wanted to get together and have a meeting for Sundance Cove. Tried to help facilitate the lighting and some of the improvements that are there. Everybody starts with that, but really the issue is they need to be organized themselves. And then our only hammer, you're right, is with the fact that, I'm not going to process the condo plat until we actually get an answer to that. And I know city engineering is on board with that because I sent that email, copied them, and the answer was great, that's what we need to do.
I mean, even if the HOA is formed, which will help with some of the maintenance items out there, I mean, that's not going to expedite any lighting. I mean, the developer's just not going to respond to the HOA like they're not responding to us, so.
I know, but
We'll reach out to the city attorney. This has gone up, there were several moving pieces to this, so I think we need to step back and take a look again and go from
If
there.
you need any of their emails, addresses for all the Myers, I have them, if that's what you need.
Okay.
That wouldn't help, that wouldn't
Very
hurt. Sure. If you want to
All right, well,
send them to Joe or I.
Because the longer we drag this out, I just feel that even for our police officers, they can't patrol if they can't see, in that particular area, and that is city limits, so.
okay, anything else from commissioners? If not, we'll move on to item 6, public issues of city concern not on the agenda. I don't see anybody from the public, so we can move on to item 7. I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.